This week we're talking about everything you need to know about buying a cottage in Ontario. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a special guest, Alex Hill from Team Grande. As you know, if you follow these episodes, Brandy is on her honeymoon right now. We got to go to her wedding last week. That was
a great night.
That was a fun night. Yeah, not a fun morning the next morning.
Absolutely not. Paid the price, but happy to be there. Congratulations, Brandy.
Yeah, such a beautiful day. Today we want to talk about everything to know about cottages. The reason I want Alex to come on the show is he himself owns a cottage. He has various properties, but one of which is a cottage that he does rent out. So he knows a lot about going through this process, and I figured who better to talk to than somebody that knows it firsthand. As well, we're sipping on some Cottage Springs today. It's the perfect cottage beverage, eh?
Free promotion.
Cheers. We're open to sponsorship, by the way, Cottage Spring, if you're watching. So let's jump into it. I guess we want to start talking first about things to consider when buying a cottage, and kick it off with, why would somebody buy a cottage?
Yeah, so I mean, for me personally, it was partially an investment, but partially for my own enjoyment. I have other rental properties, and the problem there is you don't get to enjoy it. As a matter of fact, you actually just get the opposite. You get the headaches of owning a rental property. So for me, I knew that the numbers made sense. I started looking right when COVID had started, essentially, and cottage prices were beginning to go up big time. But I still didn't think they were, I still thought, they were undervalued. So I saw an opportunity to jump in, and with what they were renting for, it just made sense financially that I could enjoy it myself part of the year, and then I could also rent it out to offset the costs. And essentially the way I look at it is at the end of the year, I get a free cottage to use for myself. So that was kind of the motivating factor right there.
That's a good point. And I mean, I guess that's a great way for somebody that wants to buy a cottage, and maybe out of the gate you can't really support it, two properties at once. It's a great way to kind of at least break even, right? You don't have to go overboard and make money, even if you just want to break even and enjoy the weekends. But I mean, like you said, you when you have an expense in life, you rent it out on a long weekend instead of using it. Eh?
Yeah, that's what happened. That's why I'm here right now. Actually, I rented it out for the long weekend so I could buy myself a new front porch.
That's it. There you go. That's responsible. So some things to consider. I know you were talking about yours. The lake is a huge thing to consider.
Yep.
And I guess we're talking whether you want to be on a big lake, a small lake, like
absolutely.
What would somebody look for?
It comes down to, I think, what you want ultimately. When I was looking, I didn't really have the budget to be very picky. So I was just open to anything waterfront within 3.5 hours from Hamilton. I ended up in Bob Cajun, which I absolutely love. The one thing I learned about the Kawartha Lakes is that it is a very weedy area. So my lake is very weedy. I bought it in the winter and I had no idea. So there are good things to really consider when you're purchasing. It would have never changed my decision. I'm very happy with where I am. But you want to think about location. So how far of a drive is it? Is there a few different routes to get there? Because we all know sometimes heading up to Muskoka on a long weekend can be a nightmare. And then the other thing to consider too is a lot of these roads can be seasonal. So there's a lot of properties on fire routes, and the cottages are only 3 seasons. So do you want 4 season? Are you okay with 3 season? Really just think about location where you want to be. If you're a boater, it'll be big to have those connecting lakes. But if you're not so much into that, you might be fine on a little smaller, shallow lake, which keeps the values down just a bit. So just some things to think about there.
For sure. And like you mentioned too, proximity to highway being an important one. And then you touched on the different roads. And I guess one thing to consider that people don't when you're looking at those types of properties is whether it's a private road or a public road.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I got lucky that mine is on a public road. So year round, I have no issues getting there. They snow plow and they sand it. But I have many cottages around me that are off on little fire routes and they don't clear them. And then there's some that actually do clear them and you just pay a yearly fee with your neighbors so that you can use it as a 4-season cottage. But yeah, it all comes down to what you want. Some people are happy to close it up for the winter. Other people want to get up there, whether they're close to a ski hill or snowmobile trails, or they just love the hiking and the views. My favorite thing was ice hockey on the lake. So we cleared off a big rink, and every time I was up there, I was shooting pucks around. So that was a lot of fun. So it all depends what you want at the end of the day.
Yeah, it looked like a lot of fun. And we'll link your social media for the cottage.
Absolutely, I
because he does
appreciate
rent
that.
it out. It's such a cool spot. What you've done to it looks amazing.
Thank you, I
Even the
appreciate
huge,
that.
big garage door that opens onto the lake.
Yeah,
I love
no.
it.
I tried to, when I was going through the process, I just thought about, when I go up to a cottage, what do I want? Like, I'm gonna bring my family and friends here. What do I need to have a good time? I don't want to just go up alone. So it was 3 bedrooms. I wanted to make it 4 so I could accommodate more people. I wanted to make sure I have all the lawn games. I wanted a bar. I wanted a couple TVs. I wanted satellite TV so I can watch all the sports games. I just thought about what I would genuinely enjoy. And then that way I know when I'm attracting a similar crowd that's going to rent it, and I kind of have what everyone needs.
Yeah, nice. And then what else should we consider? You mentioned, I know you were talking earlier about island properties can be something, like some people like that secluded.
Yep.
But I guess you're 100% off the grid on an island property? Like, what is it?
Yeah. They have power lines that run under the lake. I mean, I've never had one myself. I actually never grew up with a cottage at all. That was kind of my motivation for wanting one. But those are going to be 3-season properties, sorry. So you do want to consider, and the financing on those can be a lot different. So when you are purchasing a cottage, you do need to factor in financing because there are a few different rules depending on your location. But yeah, those are very different than your average cottage property.
Yeah, that is something to consider as well, right? Like, most people think you can just get a regular mortgage maybe on a cottage,
Yep.
like it's any other property, but as
Yeah,
you know, I guess.
the minimum you can do is 10% down as a second home with these cottage properties. The property I purchased, actually, the lady was living there year round. So it had a furnace, it had air conditioning, it had a backup generator, and it was a 4-season municipal road. So all those help build your case if you're buying it as a second home with 10% down. But what you have to factor in with the price of cottages these days, I mean, you're spending minimum $800,000 for anything waterfront. Mm-hmm. So to put 10% down on $800,000 with the current rates is a hefty payment. So not everyone's going to get approved for that. As an investor, it's like anything else. You need 20% down, and typically the banks won't factor in Airbnb income. So they'll look at market rents. And then you just also got to factor in how rural are we going? Like, how far off the grid is this cottage? Because the further you are and the more isolated you are, there could start to come into play where they want more money down, anywhere from 25% to 35%. And I've also heard the more expensive they get, the more money they may want down. So you really want to have a good conversation with a mortgage specialist that does understand cottage properties to know where you sit financially. And with a shifting market, you'll probably get a conditional offer accepted anyways. So you have your time to do your due diligence and make sure your financing is in order.
Nice. And I think you did your mortgage with Davis Carroll, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Davis was on our show. If you go back to a bunch of episodes, he talks about some really cool financial stuff.
Yeah, no, he's great
the
at what
guy.
he does. He's one of our go-to guys for sure. So he absolutely could help you with that if you had any more questions.
Definitely. I think that covers a lot of things to consider when you're looking at cottage. I mean, we can talk about water sources, waste sources, that sort of thing. Do you want to be on a well? Like, I mean, you're probably
The boring
you're going to be
stuff.
on septic, yeah. But, but I mean, that's all dependent. I think I'd probably most importantly would be the location of the cottage as opposed to what the systems are in it.
Yeah,
I would think.
Yeah, they're all going to be septic well or cistern for water source. But location for me was a big one. I know that I can get there and back in under 3 hours every time. The 407 goes out my way since I'm just past Peterborough. So it's easy to get to. It's 4-season. That was number one for me. I mean, I've even gone up and back in the same day before when I was going through renovations. And it wasn't ideal, but it wasn't that bad.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I know you mentioned try to find a local handy guy, but we'll touch on that a little bit later.
Absolutely.
But what do you guys think? What's important to you when you're looking for a cottage? If you have more questions about things to consider, drop a comment below. We'd love to answer it. If we don't know the answer, we'll get Alex to answer it. But yeah, drop those comments below. Now we're gonna shift into things you need to know when you wanna rent your cottage out, say like an Airbnb, something like that. So I know you do that, you rent yours.
Yep.
Do you rent yours year round or just in the summer?
I do, yeah, year round.
And
Yeah.
then do you use Airbnb? I know you've...
So I am on Airbnb, but I really restrict the times a year that people can book through Airbnb. My goal when I bought the cottage was to really use my network to rent it out to people I know. My concern with Airbnb was random people staying at my cottage, and I'm up there often myself. So I just don't want to come across problems or headaches or have people party and leave a mess. I feel much more comfortable renting to people I know, so I've really I've had success, luckily, with family and friends staying up there. I make sure that I charge them less than anything comparable on Airbnb, so they know they're getting a good value. I know my place is in good hands. And honestly, like 99% of the people take care of it like their own. And that's pretty much what I can ask for. I have had a few bookings through Airbnb in the off season, and they were successful. I was very happy with it. But essentially what I did was I had guys I work with build me a website where I can direct people to, and they can book directly through my website, or they can just message me directly. So I have kind of my own little platform for that. And then Airbnb helps pick up a little slack in the off season for me when things do slow down.
Do you know, Pan, how much does Airbnb charge? I've always been curious about that.
Yeah, so what I noticed, and I haven't done it a ton, so I'm not perfect at this, but I have noticed they charge a couple % on top of your nightly rate.
Okay.
That gets factored in, and then there's a service fee that they dictate what they charge, and that service fee is completely theirs.
Okay.
So if you set your nightly rate at like 400, they could add like a small percentage to that, and they keep that, and you get what your nightly rate is.
Okay.
You put the cleaning fee, and you get that. They add the service fee, and they take that. So everyone usually tries to say a certain exact percentage, but I think it varies. But I haven't dealt with it enough to know exactly what kind of percentage they're taking. I just know that's how it works.
Kind of how it works. Okay, I've always been curious about that.
Yeah.
So like if you're renting it out, I know even not through Airbnb, like what are some expenses you would you run into renting it versus if you were just using it yourself? Like what are things to consider?
Yeah, no, totally a great question. The biggest thing is cleaning fee. So I have a really good cleaning company up there that I've gotten to know well. So you want to factor in that because they're not just cleaning the house, they're doing all the bedding and kind of staging it for the next person to come in, making sure everything's exactly where it should be. And you'd be surprised how much gets moved around in 1 week when people are at a cottage. Yeah. So a good cleaning team is something that's very important to consider. In the summer, you've got to factor in all your landscaping, and these properties are typically bigger. So your grass cutting, tree trimming, and all that will be an expense. When you go into the winter, you got to factor in sanding the driveway and having a snow plow. I've had like flash freezes where my driveway turned into an ice rink. And my cleaner actually slid into a ditch from my driveway.
Jeez.
Luckily, she was okay, but things you don't realize, I've had lightning storms take out trees, and then I got to call in a tree company, and all of a sudden they're chopping up trees $500 later. For the winter, you got to take your dock out of the water, and then springtime comes around, you got to put the dock back in the water. So there's definitely things like that you got to factor in. I'm lucky enough to have a backup generator, and it has got a lot of use, which is great. Like essentially for those in the city that don't know what that is or haven't had to use that, if your power goes out, the backup generator comes on and your place operates like essentially nothing happened. So I did have guests up during a really bad storm where a lot of people had their power out, and essentially that would ruin their experience. I mean, they would, toilets, nothing would be working. But I got a really good backup generator. It clicked on. It was running for over like 100 hours. So I have a guy up there that services it. He checks it on the app. He calls me and says, hey, you need an oil change. I'm coming by. So I just try to set myself up with systems in place where like I don't have to think too much. It's running on its own. So your cleaner, someone for a backup generator. I have a plumber. I have an electrician that I use up there. My contractors were actually all from Hamilton when I did my renovation. So to get them to go back up there obviously is unrealistic. But luckily, my neighbors next door, who are the most incredible people ever, make my life so much easier up there. He's a retired contractor. So when I have little things that come up, I give him a call, he checks on it, and my dad's like my full-time handyman. So when there's a layover in between guests and I need some things done, he gets to go up, enjoy the cottage, take care of what I need. And it's worked out really well. But it is important, like you do have to have things in place because something will always go wrong. Something will always break down. And you just need to be prepared for like, okay, someone's coming the next day. I need this fixed ASAP. Yeah. Because people are paying you and they want a good experience.
And especially like yours is, I mean, it's not super far, but 3 hours. Like you don't want to, if something small breaks, you don't want to be driving 3 hours one way to fix it and then 3 hours home.
No,
right?
especially with the cost of gas.
Yeah, yeah, and that new truck of yours. Jeez. Yeah, so the cleaning fees, something you mentioned. So I guess you have a different type of cleaner than, like you said, they do the linens, they stage it.
Yeah.
Do you provide like consumable stuff like I know you have a Keurig up there, right?
Yeah.
Do you provide pods? Like, is that something like what's?
Yeah.
Or
No.
do you just tell people it's there and they can bring?
Good question. So I had a booklet made up essentially with like a hand guide to using the Cottage, which is huge. I give it to everyone before, and I'm like, read through all this. It's going to answer every question you have. So essentially, I stock the Cottage with everything you'll need to like live besides your food. So there's plates, there's everything in the kitchen you need to cook, like barbecue tongs, every utensil, pots, pans. I have 2 barbecues. I have a grill that goes over my little fire pit, so like if people want to do campfire cooking. Full kitchen, an extra fridge in the garage. We provide everything but not the food. So we have a coffee maker there, but we don't provide the coffee.
Okay.
Honestly, though, I know a lot of the people, so a lot of that gets left behind and people can reuse it. Typically, we ask people to bring their own toilet paper and paper towels, but sometimes people are forgetful, so I see my stash slowly dwindling away. I just provide all the linens, towels, and everything like that. And essentially, they bring up their toiletries and food.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Like, we did a cottage rental a few months ago, and we were told to bring our own toilet paper, but there was still, I guess, maybe the last guest left their toilet paper.
Yeah,
I don't know.
you got lucky.
But yeah, so
Firewood's a big one, actually. People
It
always
is.
ask about that, but I feel like if you provide it, they're just gonna have fires all day.
Yeah.
And it would
God
be
forbid.
like a never-ending expense. So I do tell people to bring their own firewood.
Yeah.
And I just think it's easier that way because they can buy what they want and burn what they want.
Yeah, for sure. Touch on somebody cutting the grass, having contractors on call. What else are we missing? Oh yeah, you have a lot of like games, like some things to consider, right?
Yeah,
Like,
big time. That's my favorite part is
Yeah.
during the day I'm like, I want to play lawn games and I want to sit outside in the sun. So little things for the dock. You provide like tanning chairs. I've got cornhole, bocce, ladder ball, can jam. I just think about all the games that I want to play while I'm up there with my friends, and I leave them up there. So I think that's fun for guests. In the winter, I provide a hockey net, sports balls, a football, a soccer ball, all that stuff. And you think about like, kids are going to want to play with that stuff too while they're up there. So I just try to provide whatever you would want for a good weekend. If there's something really specific that they want for them, they'll know that I don't have it and they bring it up. The kayaks and the stand-up paddleboard are a huge hit too.
Yeah.
People love that. And then I bought like a big inflatable island that just sits right beside my dock essentially. And you can just lounge out and tan in that. Again, I just think about what I'd want to use.
In the summer, that dock's a huge part of it, eh?
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah.
one of the main, when you go to a cottage, like, I've never been to one on the water that you don't sit on the dock all day.
And that was,
you're in the water.
Yeah, that was one of the biggest expenses in my renovation, surprisingly, was the dock, because as we know what happened to lumber prices during COVID, I'm hoping docks are cheaper now, but that surprised me. It was a really old dock when I purchased the property. They hadn't used it for years. And I'm like, this is where I'm going to spend most of my day. So that was one of the major expenses that I wanted to put my money into.
Nice. Do you mind me asking how much? Or
Yeah,
if you don't wanna share,
no,
that's
it's
okay.
fine.
Yeah.
It was $16,000 for the
Wow.
dock.
Just for the dock, eh? But
So-
it's must have. Right?
It's an essential.
Yeah.
It's an
That's
essential.
awesome. And then I guess, like, do you have any sort of tips and tricks for people that want to rent it out? Like,
Yeah, do your due diligence about who you're renting it to. I mean, it's very important to say no sometimes, or in a nice way, just say it's booked that weekend, because the headache just isn't worth it. So I make sure it's good people that I'm dealing with. I think that's really the important part there. Make sure you're stocked though. Like people, especially in the summer, right? I rent out for a week at a time for July and August. People can get bored quickly after a couple days. So you want to make sure you're providing them with enough things to do to keep them busy, and then options outside of the cottage. So educating them on restaurants in the area. I have a winery down the street from me that does free fruit wine tastings and all that stuff, and just things to do to get them moving around so they don't get bored and they feel like they had a really good experience and they want to come back. Because that's what you want essentially, is that repeat clientele that gets to know your cottage, and it's like, hey, we want the same week next summer and every year moving forward. So to build that up is really important, but do your due diligence. It's just like any rental property in my opinion. And just really try to make the place bulletproof. Like there's even a couple things with my renovations that I would go back on that I've learned.
like wear and tear.
Yeah, like an all white bathroom on the main level that looks beautiful in pictures, but it's like everybody's feet are like dirty by noon.
Yeah.
And then you walk inside and you got this nice white hexagon tile that's just,
that first floor one. I think that's the one that I was using. I wear my flip-flops into the bathroom by the end of the first day.
That's how it goes, right? So like you want to think about things like that just to make it like almost commercial use. Go with like darker colors and more of a cottage vibe. Little things like that you learn, but you want to make it so like people can't break things too easily.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Plastic wine glasses.
It's the key, eh?
Yeah, even myself, I'm like, oh, I won't break it. I'm sitting out by the fire. It's on the armrest of my Muskoka chair. I sit down and
first thing to
here
go.
we go, yeah.
That's okay. Well, that's awesome. That's been super informative. Thank you so much.
No problem.
If you guys have questions about renting your cottage out or what needs to go into it, drop a comment below or reach out to us. I'm also going to link Alex's social media if you want to pop a follow on him. And also, he's got a separate page for his cottage, so be sure to follow that. It's pretty cool. It's beautiful. I love following it.
Thank you.
But thanks so much for joining us, Alex. We
Thank
appreciate
you for having me. No, I appreciate that. Thank you guys for tuning in, and hopefully I'll be back in the near future.
That's it. Anytime. Again, Alex already said it. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate all of you so much that watch us week in and week out, and we love watching our group grow here. So thanks again, and we'll talk to you next week.